Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar on ServiceNow CMDB Foundations. My name is Imran, and I oversee the digital transformation organization at Royal Cyber. I'm joined with Mark Boatman, who's a senior product manager at ServiceNow. 27 years of experience at CSDM, IT for IT, well-rounded individual, professional that is well recognized by the IT community. Mark, thank you for joining and investing your time with me today.
Thank you for having me, Imran. I'm a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So today's webinar, really for everyone that has joined us to this webinar, and for those of you who will listen to this recording after the fact, is just starting out with establishing your ServiceNow CMDB Foundations. That's a great webinar for those of you who are starting out to learn what is configuration management database and what are the applications and modules and components available in ServiceNow. And also for those of you who have been in the ServiceNow space for many years, product owners, asset managers, and other users, this is going to be a great refresher. So the agenda for today's webinar, I'm going to be doing a quick walkthrough of who we are, what we do at Royal Cyber for our customers and our ServiceNow partnership. We're going to then dive right into the basics, fundamentals of CMDB Foundations, and then Mark really is going to walk us through the CMDB Data Manager, CI Class Manager, CMDB 360 Workspace, Query Builder, CMDB Search, and much more. So definitely stay tuned. Royal Cyber is an IT consulting and a digital transformation company specializing in services, solutions, and software. We're based in Chicago, and we do have global presence, as you can see on the screen, for serving customers, 600 customers around the globe, and all of our SMEs are certified not just in ServiceNow, but also many other technology stacks, which I'll cover in a second. These are the core 5 areas that represent our expertise in digital transformation. So cloud for AWS, GCP, Azure, we help customers for ongoing engagements. It could be a backlog project, or it could be a full-blown implementation for lift and shift migration project, or setting up disaster recovery, and much more. Middleware integration, really, helping to set up customers and enterprise organizations for looking into their integration layers, helping to build their API connections using technologies such as MuleSoft, Boomi, Software AG, and much more. Enterprise modernization is really for our mainframe customers that are looking to modernize their mainframe operations. And number 4 is really where ServiceNow really fits in as an iPaaS platform and a lot of automation capabilities, particularly not just in creator workflows across all modules. This is where I would fit ServiceNow. But we also do a lot of hyper automation outside of ServiceNow, which really complements the entire IT infrastructure, such as UiPath, IDP workflows, OCR, invoice processing, utilizing Automation Anywhere, Microsoft Power Apps, and much more. And then finally, data and analytics. These are some of our clients, just for your knowledge, that you can see some of the big names out there: Capital One, Humana, Heitman, and we're doing a lot of not just ServiceNow projects, implementations, but also cloud projects, middleware projects, mainframe projects, and much more. And while we're going to be taking a deeper look into CMDB today as a global premier partner that we are really proud of, we are business partners with other technology stacks. And as all IT infrastructures, there are many business applications, obviously. So we're able to help customers not only in Automation Anywhere, but also in AWS, Salesforce, Microsoft, so on and so forth. These are some of our solutions and accelerators that we built in our Royal Cyber Lab. So we listen to our customers, we understand what their challenges are, and if there's something not available out of the box, we end up creating a solution that creates net new value. So as you can see on your screen, one in particular that I'd like to explain is ServiceNow Azure DevOps integration, a very common use case where the backlog and incident records and the flow of work notes are being added in ServiceNow incidents, perhaps also in Azure DevOps. So we help customers integrate the two, which essentially not only creates that integration of the two platforms talking to each other, but also it reduces the licensing costs for DevOps. This is a proud moment. We are Gartner's recognized by Gartner's Peer Insights as one of the top ServiceNow consulting, implementation, and managed services. So you can certainly go ahead and check us out at Gartner Peer Insights when you search up Royal Cyber Consulting and Implementation for ServiceNow. A little bit about ServiceNow, our partnership with ServiceNow. We are a global premier partner, specifically in Americas, Japan, and India. And our expertise really are across technology, customer, and HR workflows. But quite specifically, we've done a lot of projects for integrations, anything that cannot be served directly through a spoke and needs a lot of customizations with your other third-party softwares. We're able to do a lot of integrations work on that. Our ServiceNow expertise as a whole team, just a quick at a glance, we've been in the space for over 12 years, delivered over 100 plus successful projects, and over 150 certified ServiceNow SMEs available to serve our customers. Now, some of the use cases and projects that we usually cater to are implementation upgrades to perhaps now this new upgrade release that ServiceNow is planning for in a couple of weeks or months, Xanadu, or even customers that are utilizing Utah or other releases. We usually help with customers to upgrade and test out the new releases. System integrations, continuation of support as managed support services, and then this is our application suite of expertise. Getting into the topic, what is CMDB? CMDB is primarily a data repository used to store information describing configuration items or CIs, as well as some asset-related information, right? So the CMDB also contains the relationship between these CIs, as you can see on your screen, such as storage, network switches, asset tags, applications, business applications, relationships between those applications, computing devices, end user devices, and a lot more. And with that, I'd like to kick this off to kick it over to Mark. Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Imran. This is my typical briefing about CMDB and CSDM. I know that we're focused on CMDB here, but I really want you, as a relatively new customer getting started on CMDB, to understand our different approach here on the platform when it comes to the CMDB, because one of the reasons I joined ServiceNow is because we take the CMDB to a different level, and we've solved some problems that maybe historically have been hard to solve within a CMDB. So we'll get into that in a minute. Now, just a little bit more about my experience. I'm based in Austin, Texas. I've been with the company now since 2016. And my first act was portfolio management, and I've got a history more or less in the area of development and enterprise architecture. So the CMDB for me is sort of it's always been out there more on the operations side of the house. The reason I joined ServiceNow is because we do take it to this next level. And when I implemented out portfolio management, which is another product that we sell here, now moving towards an EA capability, I wanted to do it as part of the platform. And so we have a lot of products that we sell on the platform, and they're all there to either contribute information or they use the information of the CMDB. Now, you'll see a couple other terms here that we'll kind of across in this presentation. So CMDB is core to the conversation, but as we expand that to a broader model in the CSDM model, we call this a service graph. It's connecting the information into context. As Imran kind of talked about the CIs coming in, those are just assets, but now we are able to understand how they're related to each other, but more importantly, how they're related to customers or other information that's coming in, like service tickets. So as the different tools out there are able to either contribute or use this information, it becomes much more valuable over time. In my history in the IT organization, CMDBs have only been for operations, and so it was limited use. But now within the platform, because you've got risk and vulnerability, you've got DevOps teams automatically writing information into the CMDB through those integrations, we're able to do so much more. And that's the powerful thing about CMDBs here on the platform. Now, one of the difficulties that most organizations have is in managing the CMDB well. And what we came up with is this three-pillar approach to a successful data foundation. So, it's really the CMDB plus all this other context that becomes valuable in understanding why the CIs are there, or who is using them, or what support groups exist to support those CIs. And the three different pillars all have to be done in order to be successful. You need to ingest information from different sources through discovery, or to be able to integrate from existing sources through something like we call service graph connectors. You also have to connect the discoverable information that you can bring in naturally through just by implementing discovery to the non-discoverable information. You also have to ensure ownership. If you don't know who owns that information, you can't go back to say, hey, is this still accurate? Should it be deleted from the CMDB at some point? So whatever ingestion rules, the folks that manage the CMDB, they don't actually own the data. They're just basically like the storage unit owners, right? They don't own the content. But if you don't pay your bill, they might be, and then you go away, then they end up owning it. We don't want that to happen. So ensure the owners are always up to date, and we also are keeping them involved. From a governance standpoint, this is the other key element of the CMDB where you need to trust the data. You need to have a governance team and roles that interact with you to fix issues that are identified from those sources. You need to establish a lifecycle process. So as you bring data into the CMDB, also you have to consider, when do we know to get rid of it? And how long do we need to keep it for? And we also need to support customization and extension. The CMDB allows for certain levels of customization, but I will warn you, a lot of the stuff that you'll encounter is already there, and we'll talk about that in a minute. You want to align your CMDB to CSTM. Now, CSTM is a whole separate topic. I don't want to go into that too deeply on this particular session, but it is our broader model, and the CMDB is part of it. The last pillar is insight. This is where you get the value from the information that you're storing in the CMDB. Of course, you're going to want to be able to use this CMDB in the context of incident change management, operational processes. These processes, if you have the CI, you will know what the impacts are. You'll know the related items if those relationships are available in the CMDB, and they should be in a great CMDB. You want to leverage that information in metrics and reporting, and we'll walk through some of those features. And leverage for planning purposes too. And we also want to be able to understand how the different products and personas and processes use this data. Now, the good thing about our platform is the products we sell that rely on this data, that's already documented, that we already know. So that's not too much of a mystery if you're using our CMDB, which is embedded on the platform. It's just another feature. So from a CMDB point of view, when we start drilling into some of the tools that we have on these three areas, we have this slide to kind of walk through that, and we'll then get into some live on my instance. We'll walk through some of these features directly. So when it comes to ingestion of information, we have a couple of technologies, service graph connectors. We have over 60 of them now that connect to specific sources that you may already have. A lot of folks still use SCCM or Intune. So there's lots of other tools that are already in place that you may be using. You could just connect that tool directly into the CMDB. We also sell something called discovery and service mapping. And it's all packaged together as ITOM visibility. But this is the ability to bring data into the CMDB, and service mapping basically establishes how those items are related. It observes the network to discover, and then of course the mapping goes from top down and identifies how things are connected through network devices like load balancers and switches, down through virtual machines to physical machine hardware, and even storage arrays that might be part of the design of each of the applications. Other technology we have is something called IRE. This is the ingestion reconciliation engine. This ensures your CMDB data is clean. It has rules to say what's the identifier for information. Without using the IRE, when you're importing data, you will most likely create duplicates, and you don't want that because then nobody will trust the data. We have a feature called multi-source. I'm not going to cover this feature today, but multi-source allows us to bring data from all of these different connectors that you might have, these existing sources, and merge it into a single source of record, single source of truth. Governance, we have a lot of features as well. The one I'm going to cover a little bit today is something called CMDB Data Manager. You have basically implement policies to be able to end of life or to continuously review and add a test or certify the data about the data in the CMDB. You have something called Class Manager. A Class Manager allows you to extend the data model in a controlled manner. And so we'll look at that in a bit more detail. CMDB 360 is really works with multi-source. So CMDB 360 gives you that 360 view of all the different sources of data to contrast and compare them. What we typically find is some of your sources may be wrong. You may have a good set of IP addresses coming from one source, but another source may not have the right IP address information. So you got to be able to select and contrast the information between those sources to choose the one you really want to go with. We'll cover this one a little bit, but there's documentation that we provide and videos, lots of information about CSDM, the broader context. And we have a couple of different types of dashboards that we'll talk about here in a minute. The Data Foundations dashboard is our view on health metrics. Invariably, things are going to go wrong. You're going to create duplicates. You're going to have information that's not there that should be there. And so the Data Foundations dashboard is our view on your quality, the health of that data. And these are objective measures. These aren't like, oh, it sucks. Oh, no, I can tell you why it sucks because A, you've got a lot of duplicates. B, you have a lack of ownership. C, we break it down for you and we provide guides, playbooks on how to fix your data because these are all things we've seen before. The CMDB Health dashboards are a little different. The CMDB Health dashboards allow you to configure your own metrics based on your own data. Since every organization has a little bit different data, they're going to have to configure your own criteria for what great looks like. And that's what the CMDB Health dashboards allows you to do. The other pillar is getting data out. Now, a lot of this is done through things like searching or visuals. So Unified Map is a great example where we can actually view the connections between those CIs. And so you can see how things work from a network device to virtual hardware to physical hardware, as an example. The queries builder and natural language search, this is down here, kind of work hand in hand. But what these do is allow you to build a query to get data out of it, to build a report from, or just to kind of see how things are working and or get information that you're looking for out of the CMDB. So very powerful, and we'll cover a little bit of that today as well. Service Graph Data Visualizer, I'm not going to get into, but this is more on the used in the ingestion pipeline. So this is ability to kind of see how data is coming in and where it's currently stuck, if it does get stuck, if any kind of validation issue. Intelligent search we talked about already, and then there's product views that are documented in our help doc, which explains how different products use this data. So if you're establishing a CMDB, let's say for service management, the ITSM product views tells you, oh, it uses the CMDB CIs, it uses the app services, it uses the technical services and business services and offerings. So it'll tell you all the elements, not only in the CMDB, but also around the CMDB, such as service definitions and how that connects. And the last thing I wanted to kind of cover here, this is a new feature that we're coming out with at the end of the year, beginning of next year is when it will be GA. So this API Insights will allow you to bring in API information about integrations and APIs that you have in your environment, but through discovery and through gateways and middleware kind of technologies. And that's coming out soon as we get that out to market. Now, the big feature that a lot of this stuff comes together in is in the CMDB workspace. So traditionally, we've had a pretty simple user experience that basically showed each of these features within a navigator section on the platform. What we are doing, and a lot of our other product catalog colleagues are doing, is bringing all these together in a more seamless user experience. So the workspace is where a lot of this stuff comes together, but not everything is in the workspace, and we'll show you what I mean by that in a minute. So just to kind of recap, these are the areas that we're going to show you kind of a brief drive-by on what these features are, where to go to find them in my instance. My instance is a Xanadu instance, so depending on if you're watching this on a replay, so this is currently a future release that we're planning to come out with in a month or so. It's going to be early access next week. So depending on when you're watching this, you may or may not see the same thing we show you in my brief demo. So keep that in mind. This will be a Xanadu level presentation. Okay, so here's my instance. Now, never mind the instance name. We can maybe ignore that for a moment. This is my personal development instance, and this is just a default screen you're going to get when you log into ServiceNow. Now, I did mention the workspaces a minute ago. A lot of the traditional user experience comes from going into this all navigator, and a lot of tools are still there with regards to what we covered a minute ago. But they're all moving into the workspace. So over time, over the next couple of years, a lot of this stuff is going to go away. It's going to get absorbed into workspaces. So I'm going to first start with the workspace, because that's where our new home is. That's our future home for a lot of the features here. And depending on what you purchased and what you've installed, you'll see a lot of workspaces here as a list and what you have access to. The CMDB workspace is by default installed with every instance. So when you stand up ServiceNow for the first time, you'll have the workspace available. Now, when we go to the workspace is actually a plugin that is also updated in the store periodically. So between family releases, you can go and update this workspace, and you may have newer features in between family releases. So something to keep in mind. You want to be able to look at store updates over time as well. At the top here, you'll see a number of elements of the workspace. It starts with this intelligent search, so we'll kind of cover that in a second. But you'll see different areas on the home screen that kind of point to specific things depending on your persona. So you may be an admin and you have access to admin things, or you're just here as a general, layman user, and you'll see a lot fewer options, and you'll be able to just go in and maybe deal with your tasks for attestation. We'll get to that in a second, but you'll be able to kind of jump right into what you need to do from this workspace homepage. Just to kind of round out the user experience here, my work is where you go into the tasks that you may have established in the workspace. So certification, attestation, the difference between these two, okay, I get a lot of questions. Certification looks at specific data values in the data. So for example, if you're capturing server information, you may be capturing things like the name, description, IP address, and tons more stuff, right? You can look at all the data you want on any record. Certification basically allows you to look at the values of those attributes and then change them or update them en masse if they're wrong. So this is a lot more involved. Attestation basically just captures you saying, yes, these records, these servers are still there. So for example, if you manage a team of that manages 10,000 servers, you might want to just look at the fact that, oh yeah, this list of 10,000 is still accurate. They're coming in properly from the discovery sources. So it's a lot lighter of a acknowledgement that the records are still there and still accurate. But if you want to go deeper on the values, certification is your tool. And they do require, of course, slightly different configuration, because in attestation, you just need to know who to assign, the tasks to acknowledge the records are still accurate, versus looking at the data values themselves and saying which data values need to be looked at or not. Okay, so depending on what level of involvement you need your data owners to get into, that these are two different options. To CMDB 360, we're not going to get into on this particular call because it is a lot more, I would say, involved, and you do need ITOM discovery to use this particular feature. So a couple things I don't have installed on my instance. You need discovery license because you're dealing with multiple sources coming in, and multi-source turned on, which allows you to collect the raw data coming in from each of those sources. We don't store it around for a long time, but to compare and contrast what's coming in, we need to have some history there and some raw data to do that comparison. So that's what this is, just giving me a little warning. I don't have it installed. that's fine. We're not going to look at it. I just want to explain that to you. Insights is where you start getting a lot of the data out of the system. And it gives you some insights on what's going on. And in my instance, it's pretty new. I haven't ingested any information. I haven't actually gone through any governance processes, and I've done it, but I have done a little bit of searching. So we're looking at how folks are using the CMDB and providing some feedback for those that are managing the data, how things are going, right? What's coming in? Are we governing it? Are we actually using it, right? In general. And there's some performance insights that you can get into here as well. I'm not going to get into that. And then some other data. So you'll see more information come into this space here over time. But for the CMDB, if you're getting started and you're configuring your CMDB, you're wanting to actually understand how some of these tools work, like Data Manager and CSS Class Manager. This is your home page for a lot of the management tasks to setting up and getting it going. And so what you'll see here is not a lot of information. So this right here is a record. It's basically telling you how many informations that you are managing through the health dashboards, the correctness of that data, duplicate counts, activity. So just an overview of a bunch of records that anything that's changed. If you got orphaned CIs based on our metrics, or setting up the reports. So this is like just a quick management view on what's going on, and it draws your attention to some of the things you need to work on, and that's happened lately. The tools I really want to focus on are on the far right. And I want to start with something called CI Class Manager. CI Class Manager is where we set up the structure for the CIs. Now, when you bring information in, and the way this works, as this is coming up, is that at the end of the day, a CI is what we call a base class. If anybody here has any kind of object-oriented programming history or understanding, there's a hierarchy of CMDB CIs, and each CI inherits information from its root class. And so you'll see here a bunch of options here, and this is laid out like a hierarchy. And so I'm going to pick on hardware here because that's where most people start their journey. So if you look at, there's a root thing called configuration item at the very top, and I got 3,265 configuration items in this instance, right? And then once I scroll down here, I see I have 901 hardware items, but what are they exactly? So this is a classification where you can now, when you're bringing data in from various sources, you can classify this data, and then that adds additional requirements for the data, such as attributes or related items that you want to capture. And so if you look at computer, you open that up and you can see there's a number of different computers, but then you have a subtype called server. And so there's a server versus client machine, for example. And then when you open up server, you have different types of servers. We typically see this used, and already by Discovery, if you turn on our Discovery capability, we'll put the right thing in the right place for you. But if you're writing your own, you need to look at this hierarchy to make sure that the right thing is in the right place. And so I'm just going to open up server for a minute and look at this information. You can see there's some metadata about this particular class. You can have a team that manages the whole class. You can actually have a icon associated with it. You can change some of those things. So this is really looking at the classes. And then there's another little feature I wanted to point out here called principal classes. If you're running incident management or change management, when you turn this on, this means this class will show up as a choice in the list of CIs to choose. So it's a little configuration option that you actually have to think about. Okay, we're going to allow people to choose servers, but not storage servers, right? So you can kind of be very precise in what shows up for the folks that are in your incident management team, change management team, and you can kind of hide a lot of the noise from them. There's a lot of other things that you'll find inside the class manager. These are the attributes that are basically here on this item. So you'll have things like The classification itself, processor name. Processor name may not apply to other kinds of things in this hierarchy, but it does for hardware. We recognize that for all hardware, it does have a processor. And so this is just giving you an idea of what all of this stuff is. CPU, obviously it's compute hardware. And this is everything. Now, some of these items are defined at the base class or class above this, and some of these items are defined here. So if I go to derived, okay, these are things that attributes that are derived from the base class. Everything in the class structure below this in the hierarchy has these. If you go to the added class items, these are added in this particular class. So all hardware, all servers have this information, but the base class may have the stuff that's in the derived area. That's what gets inherited in terms of attributes. Other things that you get into is the identification rule. The identification rule allows us to identify what kind of thing it is. And you'll see there's different identifiers. Identifiers are a key, like a primary key. How do I know this is a unique entity? And some things, this is like your base identifier rule. If I go to the server and hierarchy and I look at different types of servers, I may have like server hardware, network servers, Unix servers, so Windows servers. So you may have different identifiers for different types. So I'm going to just go into the Windows server for a second, and we may have some different settings here to identify a Windows server versus a Linux server, and that it's unique. So depending on the type it is, you may have different identification reconciliation rules or even suggested relationships. So this is where you go in, you configure all this stuff. This isn't going to be a full class, just kind of a run through on these features. Reconciliation rules allows you to, as you kind of bring that data in, you can reconcile with existing data, and you can then prioritize which rule to use. Like if it's got the same network card, that might be an indicator that's the same item, or you might want to use some other attribute like the name. Name's not a good one because people can change names, but however you reconcile data from as you bring in information and refresh it, that's how you set that up. And then you have suggested relationships. This is where it becomes a little bit more complicated, but this is where when folks are manually, let's say, adding information or updating relationships, these suggested relationships will come up as an option in the user experience. So if this is a Windows server, it actually contains storage devices or disks or memory modules. So you'll see that all of the suggested items are part of this diagram. And what you do is you can edit this, you can change it to whatever suits your needs. But these are the things that we push out there by default. And it's a good reference if you're wondering how things should be related. These are our suggestions. Obviously, you can change them, and they are used in the other processes that manipulate this data. Other information, health rules, you can define what completeness, compliance, and correctness means for this particular item. So we don't have anything set up today, but this is where you would change the rules for this particular CI type and say, how do I know it's correct? How do I know it's in compliance? And those rules are set up here per CI type, per class, okay? So that's a really quick drive-by of the class manager. It is a super critical core part of the CMDB, and it's something you want to be able to use. Coming back to the workspace, I want to look at the another feature here under management. It's the data manager. So this is where we set up policies here. Data manager, and I'm not going to set anything up. I don't know if I have anything set up already, but we like to think about these are where the policies get set for the information that you have in the CMDB. And you may have a process to activate these, because this will assign tasks. This will flag things as not compliant based on the policies and move things from active to retired when you need to get there. So there's a lot of things that come into place when you create a new policy. I'm just going to show you how that works. When you go to create the policy, you are choosing the name, description, but most importantly is the type of policy it is. And it looks like I need one. Not a full demo, but just trying to keep this minimum. And you can see there's a number of different policies. Most of these deal with information after it's already been imported into the system. So the ingestion stuff has already happened, right? Now we're looking at how do I know to archive this information or delete it? And that could be triggered on the last time I discovered it, the last time I actually brought that information in. If it's what we call stale, nothing's brought that a refresh of it in for more than 30 days, maybe we want to archive it or go to ask somebody before we archive it. So you can put a process in the step. Attestation will go to somebody like once a quarter or once every 6 months or even a year. You can send out a notification to the owners of that data to say, hey, can you validate this information is still accurate? And they will look at the list of stuff and say yes or no and deal with the situation. Certification, like I said, goes into the data values, much more involved. We won't get into that. Deletion and deleted related entries. So when you delete a CI, you may have related items. I just showed you the server and the network card and memory module. Those are different CIs. Do you want to delete all of those related entries at the same time you delete the main one? That really depends on your process. That depends on your data retention policies, things like that. And then last, of course, is retire. So this is typically your first step when you're dealing with old data. You want to mark it to retired, then you want to archive it, and then you want to delete it. That's your typical end of life scenario. Okay, so that's a quick drive-by on the data manager. That's a really valuable tool, and it's critical to think about setting this up as you're bringing data in, right? The biggest problem I see is folks bring data in, they don't set up a policy to manage it or get rid of it, and therefore after a couple of years it's just a big bunch of stuff and nobody really knows if it's accurate anymore. So you want to go through this. Another feature that we talked about here is going back to management is the health dashboards, which I kind of showed you. The health dashboards are being moved into the user experience here. I'm not going to get into that. The Data Foundations dashboard is also now part of the user experience. So if I go into the CMDB Data Foundations dashboard, this is our perspective on your data quality. These are objective measures to be able to say, hey, these are the things that you should be doing according to our best practices and guidance. Okay. And so when this comes up, and let's see, it's taking a minute. You'll see a number of things that come up, and this is already run on my instance, it looks like. So this is a based on a scheduled job, you got to have this running in the background, and it populates all this information. So in this case, it shows you, hey, I've got 99 CIs that don't have a serial number, and that just means it doesn't have a primary key. It doesn't have the proper primary key. Or I got 19 with missing owners. And so all of this is just a bubble up of that. And then here is a list of different metrics that we just kind of walked through in priority order. And this just gives you a score for each one, and there's kind of an overall arching score, basically. So, and the most important thing about this, once you get your metric and you're like, oh, this doesn't look good, we should work on something, you want to look at your remediation advice. And this is a knowledge article that has all kinds of advice on what to do and how to fix these things that, based on our experience and what may be going wrong in your environment. So a lot of experience is kind of pushed in here. You don't have to call somebody necessarily. A lot of things can be just fixed based on reading these articles. I highly recommend you do that, and you can better manage your full CMDB. Okay, so we covered a lot on the management of the data. I'm going to talk a little bit about getting value out of it, and so some of the insight aspects. So I got to go back here to my workspace, going to my main workspace view. Yeah, here it is. Okay, insights, it's already up here. So this is where you get that value out. But I think a lot of the good insights are based on things like query builder and dependency views and unified maps. So unified maps is really a new version of dependency views. Okay, unified maps was kind of a refactoring of our old dependency views that works in the old drop-down navigator here that I showed you. But the unified map is our new one. And when you go to the unified map, this is where you can visually see all those entities and their dependencies. Now, to do this, I need to start with something. And I don't know the data that I have here. So this is the unified map. This is an example I brought up of attendance management system, and you can see how these layers are all structured from, from a business capability layer all the way down to the application, down to related information in there, and the instances, the services, and the instances of the different components that are used in the structure of this particular application. So depending on where you start, this will look a little different. You can change the focus. Like if I want to focus in on the Apache web server, there are additional information you can see over here on the right. If you have an outage, for example, it'll show up on the graphic. And it'll also give you an idea of changes or active incidents, for example, that are on that. So this is your visual into that data and seeing how it's used, how it's structured within your system. So it's super powerful. This is part of other workspaces that you may use, Operator's Workspace. So we have a lot of different, I would say, other areas of the platform that leverage this view. And depending on what your job is, they'll provide slightly different related data. And so that becomes very important. So this is just a quick drive-by on the unified maps and sort of how this works. There's a lot more to it, obviously. If this is an app service, you would see a slightly different user experience here. It adds a little bit more data if it's a service mapped item. And then of course, there's all kinds of attributes that are available right here. So you don't have to go into a form or into another view. And that's all configurable. So there's certain information that you want to use or don't want to use. You can configure this little right-hand pane to focus in on the attributes that you want people to really pay attention to. So different attributes for different types of information on the screen. So that is really a quick, simple overview of unified maps. You can see you can change the levels of depth, and you can do all kinds of other stuff, filtering. And I don't want to get into that. We don't have enough time on this particular session, but you get an idea, I think. The last big thing I want to show you is something that's really cool called an intelligence search. And this is where you start getting data out of it. Obviously, I talked about other products that use this data, and you can see I have a couple of recent searches. I'm just going to bring one up I've already done. You could do something very simple like all Linux servers, and when I run that query, it'll return my list of Linux servers. Our personal development instances aren't very powerful. All right, so this is a very simple query, right? What we call this is a single table query. I just asked for one thing out of one table, and that's it. So that's just a simple way that we actually process searches here and get value out. You could go into a more complex query builder. You could build reports off the query results, choose what attributes you want from each of the different tables involved. So it's a very powerful thing, and this is where obviously that's where we get the value from having this information. You got to use it. You got to use it in various processes. You can do ad hoc reporting, etc. So that's pretty much what I wanted to cover. This is just a quick drive-by. So many features. There's a lot more in there. But if you get to the CMDB workspace and a few things like Class Manager, those are all the nuts and bolts tools that you really need to know to get started and be successful.
Awesome, Mark. Well, super valuable, extremely helpful. I'm sure for those of audience that are listening in, again, like I said, starting out or also learning to explore other new features of CMDB, this walkthrough and detailed demo was amazing. So thank you so much, Mark. Of course, we're going to have Q&A towards the end too. I just want to point out this quick action item for everybody on this call. When we look at the CMDB of all organizations there, most of them are not in the healthy state. It could be duplicates, as Mark said, and the hierarchy mapping is not right. It's not talking to each of those modules and not getting into an IT audit state, or perhaps not ready for any potential audit outages that may have happened. So CMDB is extremely critical getting into a healthy state. And so we would like for you to kickstart your journey with with us, Royal Cyber. If you're interested, it's a 3 weeks of a CMDB detailed assessment. Really, the assessment scope is we look at the questionnaire, we send over that to try to learn more about your CMDB state. We do conduct a system review, current environment analysis, and any customizations that you may have done, we're going to review that too. At the end, you're going to have an executive report as a deliverable that's going to give you, one, a gap analysis, not just duplicates, but among other components too, and then help you with making some good solid recommendations based on our expertise for configuration or reconfiguration and any potential solutions to get you up to speed, and then an overall CMDB roadmap for future purposes. Okay. And then that leaves us to questions and answers, and we're happy to take any live questions. And for those of you who were not able to get back in this webinar, we'll be sure to follow up with you shortly after the webinar.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm glad you have those services available for our customers. We really rely on our partners like yourselves